Hello and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World. My name is Skaya. Every year, world leaders and experts gather to tackle the climate crisis at the UN Climate Conference. Now, this year's edition, called COP30, kicks off today in Brazil. But now, what really happens at these annual summits? Well, joining me now in studio to break it down is Daniel Czyżewski, energy analyst at the Polska's Natury Foundation. Daniel, thanks for being with us here in studio.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Now, before we get into all these details, we're talking about from what we can assume, right? We have these leaders, most likely some of them showing up in private jets, right? I mean, before I'm going to ask you about how much is this climate conference actually costing, doesn't that defeat the purpose of, I'm going to be devil's advocate and saying to having this climate conference held with all these jets near the Amazon in Brazil?
Yeah, the optics can be awkward. It may seem like it's a cool kids gathering or rich kids gathering, more like that. But if anything is supposed to be established at this conference, you have to have world leaders, you have to have global table, because the climate change is a global issue. And the COPs, which is Conference of Parties of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change from 1992, is the only summit, the only place where every nation in the world can join and discuss climate issues.
And let's get you to tell us a little bit more about that. So who can we expect to be there today? To my understanding, it's going to take place until November 21st, right? So who is going to be there? What are the key issues on the agenda that these leaders are going to be tackling? And what does make this summit so significant?
Well, the question this year is about who is missing, who is absent at the COP, and that is United States, of course. It's very hard to negotiate, to establish anything at the global level without the United States. Of course, we are at the end of a unilateral world. We can see that from a couple of years, but United States are still the key player in global economy, in global politics, especially in this case in finance and trade. It will be very difficult to establish something significant without the US representation. As we know, the current administration under President Trump is not only not joining the global climate action, but also obstructing it in a way. We had the talks about the global maritime carbon tax recently, and the United States actively obstruct that process, didn't want any global carbon tax on maritime. Maritime emissions are somewhat couple of percent of global emissions, so that's who is missing. And the leader of the talks at COP would be probably European Union. Mm-hmm. But European Union will be alone in that process. There have to be a balance of powers, because COP, it's about climate, of course, but it's complicated geopolitical economic game, and we have zero-sum game basically in geopolitics, and we are discussing in a framework of cutting emissions, of risking the economic system of each countries. So the talks will be very difficult. We have China, which want to have a stronger impact on those negotiations. The balance of power is shifted without the United States.
What about location? Does the fact that this year's edition is being held, in the Amazon, in the Brazil, tell us something?
Yes, of course, it's significant that Brazil wants to send a signal and put a light on Amazon rainforests, of course. We have large representation of indigenous people in Belém, which is basically a place at the gate of Amazon rainforests. So that's the goal of the organizers. Of course, Brazil itself didn't always treated Amazon really very well, but that's of course the intention behind that. On the other hand, Brazil itself is a large producer of oil, for example, eighth in the world, with 3.4 million barrels produced per day, and well, with ambitions to extend that. So Brazil, of course, is here for public relations reasons. But this Amazon, which is lungs of the earth, as we often say, is put on a spotlight here.
And another thing I think we should, I mean, it's a very key word that you just said, being put on the spotlight. I mean, you know, if we talk about the climate cost for the planet, of course, is immense, right? Encompassing trillions of dollars in economic damage, right? From, you know, weather conditions, lost productivity. How is that going to look like? I mean, and why is climate finance, especially for vulnerable countries, the most possibly Brazil being one of them, so important?
Well, we have to go back a little bit in history, because the global south, the developing countries, are saying that the richer countries, the Western countries mostly, got rich on fossil fuels, on burning fossil fuels, basically. And now the same countries, the rich north, want to decarbonize, want to get away from fossil fuels, and is telling developing countries that you cannot use them because of climate change. So the developing countries are saying to give us money to create our energy systems, our economy in a way that they won't emit CO2. We have to look also at we can go back to the beginning of our conversation, because the global emissions are still rising, are still hitting records. We have almost 38 billion tons of CO2 emitted last year. Just in 1990 we had only 22 billion tons. So they keep rising. The investments in oil and gas are still going and really speeding up last years. So those accusations about this summit not showing any results are of course well argumented, and we need more acceleration of those agreements, not only statements, not only goals, but roadmaps to decarbonize economies. It's very hard to do that. It's very hard to accomplish that on a global level. But
let me ask you this. Sorry for interrupting for a moment. Let me ask you this: do non-governmental organizations possibly play a role during these types of conferences, like this year's edition, COP30, in trying to you know, help them, like you're saying, reduce all these negative impacts?
Yes, of course, there are many actors in climate action area. NGOs are one of them, and you mentioned those private jets or planes, entire planes with leaders.
Which probably defeats the whole purpose, right?
They are not empty. The leaders have entire teams that will negotiate every word, every comma in those statements, in those final documents of COP. And when you have so many countries, it's very difficult, and you have to have specialized teams of lawyers, diplomats, and so on to establish anything, basically.
Thank you so much, Daniel Czyżewski, energy analyst at the Polska Natury Foundation, for breaking it down for us here.
Thank you very much.
And that's all for this edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm Diana Skaya. Thanks for watching.